On the night of October 20, 2020, the floodlights around the toll gate suddenly went off, and shortly after that, a detachment of heavily armed soldiers pulled up and immediately opened fire on the unarmed protesters. According to the report of a Lagos State Judicial Panel of Inquiry into the matter, relying on evidence from eyewitnesses and hospitals, many people died in the process, and a lot more sustained various degrees of injury from live bullets, as well as from being trampled upon in the ensuing melee. 2 years down the line, what lessons have been learned? Colonel Hassan Stan-Labo is a security risk management consultant. He joins us now to discuss this issue, in addition to how the Nigerian military can be repositioned to imbibe international conventions on rules of engagement with non-combatants, as well as what will ideally constitute the rights and privileges of people engaging in protest. Good morning, Colonel. Good to have you join us this morning. Good morning.
Morning, Steve. Morning. Thanks so much. Morning to everybody in the studio there.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Well, let's start this way. Is 2 days after yet another memorial, if you like, of the EndSARS protest of October 20, 2020. We saw what happened, and unfortunately, we saw yet again that the police were high-handed. You know what happened. Even the journalists were not spared. How will you assess what happened 2 days ago at the Lekki toll gates in Lagos in relation to the larger memorial and anniversary, second anniversary of the EndSARS protest of 2 years ago?
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think clearly it's a clear indication that we seem not to have fully understood or imbibed whatever lessons we are supposed to have learned from our past experience as far as the EndSARS situation is concerned. In a situation like this, where I would say an anniversary is being marked in memory of those who lost their lives and so on, and more so, of course, to recall the very import of what must have actually happened. I expect that government, ordinarily I would have said I expect that security agencies, but by extension, government is supposed to know how to tread carefully, be in the same mood with those of us who are looking back and saying, wow, we wish things like this had not happened. We wish we had a more responsive government that would have been able to maybe strive at meeting its own part of the social contract it has with the people. And our youths wouldn't be out there on the streets demanding for their rights, which has been, of course, trampled upon by security agencies, okay? Demanding for good governance, which we have not seen, especially in the last 7 to 8 years, and so on and so forth. So I'll just summarize it in that.
All right, Colonel Stan-Labo, let's look at Nigeria's security sector's reform efforts over the last 2 years. How would you assess this? Would you say there have been any notable strides in this regard? Have there been any efforts at all, actually?
You mean in terms of reforms in the national security sector?
Sector?
Yeah. Well, I'm being made to understand some level of retraining is ongoing in the police force. I think we have to really reinforce that and ensure that our policemen and generally the entire national security sector is updated with current practices within the international community. If such training is ongoing in the police, I expect that a lot of vigor should be brought to bear on it to ensure that we are able to attain required standards. For the military, I know lots of training goes on in the military. Okay, but we may probably sit down again, take a look at curriculum, especially in the case of the police. It's not just retraining in same old habits. First and foremost, whatever reforms that are taking place in the police has to first and foremost got to do with the curriculum itself. All right, we should review it in such a manner that it projects a modern army, a modern police force, a 21st century police that is quite conversant with the yearnings of the people, that makes itself, a friend of the public, and so on. Today, a lot of civilians out there traveling on the highway would always want to avoid the police. In my own case, it's a bit different because I know if I lost my way, in most cases, I prefer to talk to a uniformed person. And I always see the policeman as somebody whom I could stop to want to talk with, irrespective of whatever impression we all have of the police. But I think you don't expect some civilians who have not been in uniform before to acquire such level of, confidence to want to approach a policeman. Because in most cases, you talking with the police, if you are not careful, you get yourself into trouble. So you begin to wonder, this is a police who, if they have, a search warrant to search your house, before you know what, they have planted one or two things, and then turn around and arrest you and show you what they have pulled out of your house. So today when a policeman is to search your house, you first start by searching the policeman too, which is so disturbing. But what can you do? So I think they need to build in this confidence. It's got to be there, and the confidence can only be built in when the police itself is seen to be an organization that the public can trust.
All right. A lot has been said about the training of the Nigerian police. Now, I'd like to touch more on the training of the Nigerian military. On that ill-fated night of October 20, 2020, where, heavily armed soldiers pulled up and opened fire on unarmed protesters. Many affected persons have claimed that their family members were killed that night. But till now, the government says nobody died, even with the report of the judicial panel of inquiry, which aligns with the claims of the protesters. Now, if you were to assess the Nigerian military's rules of engagement, would you say soldiers deployed to the scene that night acted accordance with the rules as it relates to unarmed citizens? And do you think lessons have been learned?
Well, soldiers that were probably asked to take charge of the situation that night may probably not have fully implemented what I want to call the rules of engagement that avails assistance to civil authority, that is in aid of civil authority. And what does the rule say? First of all, Section 217, subsection 2C of the Constitution of the Federal Republic empowers the commander and president of the country to bring out troops, to suppress, to go against any form of suppression, and of course, in aid of civil authority. All right? Pursuant to that, sections 8, 1, and 3 of the Armed Forces Act itself to, demands of the military to use the use of adequate force, in quelling any form of repression that might lead to death, injury, or even damage to properties. Okay? Now, in the application of these various sections, which of course legally empowers the civil authority and the president to bring out men, the minimum force is what is expected to be applied. Who determines what the minimum force is? It is the commander on ground that determines what the minimum force is. Okay? And before you begin to engage any form of lethal force to carrying out such lines of actions, lethal force can only be applied when you have exhausted all peaceful means, which now includes personal contact, negotiations, and so on. When you have exhausted this and things are not working out and you are already seeing that time is probably not at your disposal, life, property, and so on are highly threatened and so on, fine. You can now begin to apply, lethal force, engage in such manner. However, bearing in mind the use of minimum force, okay? And whatever form of lethal force you are applying, it is meant for you to disarm, not outrightly kill, but to disarm. So in such cases, if I still remember my teaching very well as a very young officer, you are always advised that you make sure you aim at the legs and so on. You disarm the fellow. All right? I mean, what's it called now? Disable the fellow. All right? If the fellow is armed, you now disarm him and so on. So the most important thing is to make sure that the belligerents out there or the protesters out there are no longer capable to carry out whatever the threat they represent. They can no longer, for instance, take any life. They can no longer damage any property and so on. And that's the most important thing. And having done that, you must make sure, as the commander on ground, you are keeping your records. Because every line of action you take, at the end of the day, you've got to defend it. So you must keep proper records. Pictorial, written, whatever. All your evidence must be well gathered. They must be well gathered. So that at the end of the day, if anything ensues, like we had in the case of the EndSARS, all these facts will be presented. All right. So that's what the rules of engagement actually says,
All right, Colonel. I would like to stay a bit more on the EndSARS issue, and I would like to ask two questions. First is further clarity on what the rule of engagement says, particularly as it concerns when unarmed protesters sit down, singing the national anthem, and waving the Nigerian flag, holding each other's, hands. What was the military or the police expected to do in that circumstance? Because there was so much confusion 2 years ago when people said that, don't worry, stay there, just be calm. For as long as you are holding the Nigerian flag and you are singing the national anthem and you are not on your feet, it is not likely that any evil or any attack will befall you. But of course, we know what has happened. So for clarity, what really does the rule say when a situation like that, presents itself? And then secondly, if you don't mind, I know that you have a bit of affiliation with the Obedient movement. So I'd like to ask you for your understanding of the message that the running mate to the candidate of the Labour Party, Yusuf Dati Baba Ahmed, was saying in a recent interview when he said that, to his understanding, no massacre occurred, that it was debatable that massacre occurred on the night of October 20, 2020. And that to his understanding, what he thought happened was an abuse of process and human rights. Would that be your understanding of what happened on that day? And would that be the position of the Labour Party, and especially the presidential candidate and his running mate of your party?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I cannot hold brief for the leadership of my party. I don't have that authority to hold brief on their behalf. I can only speak for myself. And of course, like you already know, I'm a highly opinionated Nigerian. I could only speak for myself. I cannot speak for Dati. I cannot speak for Obi. If there are pronounced aspects of their manifesto, fine, I could help propagate it further and so on. So as to what Dati said, I'm not going to comment on that because it's his own opinion. I want to stand, as far as my opinion is concerned, I would rather take the position of the panel that was set up. In a situation as this where there are all sorts of controversies and we set up a panel, when the panel comes out with its decision, I expect that we all bow to that. Every other thing is at your own level. I personally would subscribe to what the panel said, and the panel said there were shootouts, there were recorded deaths, and so on and so forth. And that's why I laugh when a government that set up a panel turns around to say, to take exception from the reports of the panel. I wonder if we're moving forward or we're moving backwards. I really wonder. It's unfortunate anyway, because I expect that people in authority should be able to exhibit some level of integrity. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. I am of the opinion that, well, I think some deaths were recorded. Only yesterday or so, we saw some of the mothers, I would say, or parents of some of the individuals who were killed. They were in tears, and I think it was on your own channel too, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm even made to understand that some compensation has been paid out to some of them, and so on. So I think the panel must have really established that. But in the spirit of reconciliation, like I often say, I think government should take steps, move further, be able to assuage and appease some of these families in any way they can, and so that as much as possible, we try to see how we can wipe part of this very bitter memory, you know, from our psyche and things like that. It is important that we try to forget all these things and begin to preach some level of reconciliation, not just in words. Government should also endeavor to see that some of the recommendations that came out are fully implemented and so on. The reforms should be vigorously pursued. Okay, I'm made to understand that we still have about 40 victims of this 40 of these youths who participated in the protest still being held custody. 2 years later, 2 years, something is amiss then. Something is amiss. But anyway, we know the way this federal government, the present administration operates. So I wouldn't be too surprised, but I wish somebody could just advise them that, look, the earlier we get done with this, the better. Other aspects of the recommendations should be addressed too, and as quickly as possible, so that when anniversaries come, we don't keep revisiting these things. That's the way I see it. And the first aspect of your question had to do with, Steve, can you remind me?
Yes, about clarity about people, unarmed protesters, if they are holding their hands and they are sitting down and holding Nigerian flag and singing the national anthem. Is it possible that they could be attacked? What does the rule say for the military if such a situation presents itself?
As to what the rule says, all those, the national flag or whatever and so on that they were holding, I don't want to say it's inconsequential, but the point I want to make is that my concern is whether you have any threat to lives and property around you and so on. Okay? If you are, and you are actually of severe threat, the military has got to do its job, the police has got to do its job. Okay? Going by the laid down rules of the rules of engagement in aid of civil authority. All right? That you are carrying a flag does not mean that if you carry a flag and you are stabbing someone, we cannot get across to you. Why not? The flag is not enough to it's not an authority. I mean, gives you the whatever it takes, the audacity to engage in what you shouldn't be engaged in. All right? But invariably from the whole thing I reeled out here by way of virtue of the rules of engagement, I think it must be said that we probably had not adhered strictly to the rules, you know, and things like that. It boils down to, like we said, further training. We must sharpen our training. We must ensure that commanders on ground are in firm control of their men, ensuring that what is expected of them is what is being done, and so on. Okay? And that is why the element of training is being mentioned whenever we talk of these things.
All right, Colonel.
Like I said, I know a lot of training.
Just a quick one, Colonel. Beyond the dictionary meaning, in military parlance, what constitutes a massacre?
You want us to go into semantics now. To me, massacre has to do with a large, huge number of death arising from maybe engagement with opposite force and so on. Massacre, like we know way back, could always be carried out by elements of security forces sent in to clear down a group of people who are probably protesting. We saw this much in the old South Africa when it was under the Botha administration and all the mess that went on there by way of violations of fundamental rights of the blacks, you know. So we talk of the Sharpeville massacre and so on. That would be my understanding of what a massacre is. But if one were to say whether a massacre took place at Lekki, I would say no. I think it hasn't gotten to that. We cannot say massacre took place at Lekki. No. Unless we really don't understand what the true meaning of massacre is. If you say there were deaths, yes. But if you say massacre, I would say no.
All right, Colonel Stan-Labo.
That's an exaggerated position.
Okay, on that note, I mean, in the interest of the future and for the purpose of clarity, and of course with the benefit of your experience and background, when it comes to protesters' rights, I'm going to tarry on this question a little bit more, as Steve, asked earlier. What is within the acceptable ambit of this context in clear terms? And at what point does this begin to translate into constituting a nuisance or belligerence, as you alluded to earlier?
I'm afraid, Avi, you have to repeat the question again, please.
Okay. I want to know in very clear terms, at what point does it, when it comes to protesters' rights, at what point does this begin to translate into constituting a nuisance or belligerence? For clarity, in the interest of the future.
When it comes to what rights?
Protesters' rights. Rights of protesters. So in the example of the EndSARS movement, so everyone who came out to protest against the status quo, what about their rights? At what point does this begin to translate?
Protesters' rights.
That's it. Please excuse my accent.
You said when does it come to?
Yes, at what point do their actions begin to constitute a nuisance? Steve asked a question earlier in terms of people sitting down holding their flags peacefully, putting their points across.
Yeah, I get you now.
At what point do these actions actually begin to translate into belligerence or constituting a nuisance?
Yeah, I get you. Let me just respond. If you say at what point, I would say at that point when the crowd is no longer controllable, at that point where the crowd loses control of itself. And that's why in protests like that, I expect that the leadership of the group should be able to exert some control. And besides, in a protest like this, I expect that both left and right, the security agents, as seen in the police, should provide necessary, I don't want to say guidance, but be able to lead them through, making sure that there's no external intrusion, and making sure that the crowd too does not go out of its bounds, and so on. The crowd begins to violate the rules when it gets out of order. And mob action the way it is in most cases. So if the crowd resorts to the throwing of stones, if the crowd resorts to the throwing of missiles and so on, or they are armed with all sorts of equipment that could be used against the police and so on. Once the crowd is becoming beginning to behave in an unlike manner, it's got to be checked. And of course, like the security agencies will be studying the situation to know when to actually come in. All right? And things like that. And like I said when reading out or when talking about the rules of engagement, before the security agents begin to apply any form of lethal force, when you start noticing things like this, you talk with the leadership of the group. You talk with the leadership of the group. If like in the EndSARS, when they tell you we have no leaders and so on, but there are people you can talk with here, because you must ensure that all peaceful means are exhausted through personal contacts and negotiations. All right? So I think things like this would have been put in place. If, however, like somebody will tell you, look, it was a rowdy situation, that was not, right from the time you arrive on the ground, you would have tried to establish some form of contact. The local commander on ground should have tried to establish some form of contact and talk with one or two of persons you perceive to be playing some leadership role. And things like that, And there are times when security agents even provoke crowd into actions which ordinarily they wouldn't have taken. You arrive at the scene of a peaceful protest and you start tear gassing. And you start pouring, what do they call it? Is it water shooting? And so on. With hot water. You make the crowd to probably lose control of itself, scatter all over the place, and you now create a riotous situation. I expect you to just come, stay put. Your leader establishes contact with them and let them know we are just here to oversee the situation. Please make sure your men don't go out of hand. We are here as your own police to protect you and protect national property and individuals who have no business with you. We are here for everybody. You talk, and then you stay and watch. Not to arrive and you begin to tear gas and so on. You create so much problems because you already arrive at the scene biased. Biased. Probably acting on some instructions you were given even before coming.
All right. And that brings me to my next question. As you know, the EndSARS revolution no doubt began a revolution among the Nigerian youth. Many have said that they have found their voice and are now more political, holding the government to account. They call themselves the Sorosoke generation. But when you look back at what has transpired so far, especially with the seeming government clampdown on peaceful assembly, as we even witnessed during the second anniversary, and the police harassing protesters, like you have said, that converged at the Lekki toll gate, Nigerians are asking, is there any hope for change? Do you think that the federal government will ever take responsibility for the damaging effects of the EndSARS protests?
To start with, if we are talking about a hope for change or whether the federal government would ever take responsibility, like you are saying, if by that you are referring to this administration, I would say no. As a citizen of the Federal Republic, I have personally at my personal level, lost confidence in this administration, lost confidence in my president. I must be frank with you. That's my position as a citizen. As a citizen who elected leaders to oversee my affairs, to oversee the social contract they should have with me or with the people. And if that has been violated for about 7 or 8 years, what other confidence do I have in the administration other than to pray that February 15th or whatever the date comes, I will use our ballot PVC to effect a change, not just in the party, but sweeping them off completely and see how we can bring in a responsible government that can listen to the people and, of course, meet with the terms of the social contract they have gone into with us. As it is now, the two components that make up the social contract, be it the security component and the welfare component, which of course, like you know, rest on the bipod, have all not been met. The administration has failed woefully, and we'll have to sweep them off and bring in another administration that will probably be a better one. We will see some hope in somebody like Peter Obi from his utterances. We want to believe that the Almighty God will have mercy on us as a country and see us have a better leader or have better leadership. We are tired with the leadership or leaders whom we have entrusted with our collective patrimony. Unfortunately, they have ended up looting it over, pilfering it, and now they have even gone into oil theft. God save Nigeria.
All right, Colonel, let me take it from where you have just stopped, you know, God save Nigeria. I'm aware that there are a number of other retired military officers and police officers, you know, generals even, who have bought into the obedient movement, who are also asking for change in some form come February and March when the elections will hold in Nigeria. So I can say that you are in good company because of, you know, the other one. So first, are you going to be playing any specific role for the Labour Party and the obedient movement in the build-up to the election, presidential campaign council or not? Will you be playing any specific role? And then secondly, do you really see a pathway to victory for the Labour Party, particularly at the presidential level? I know, of course, that you be aware that this is very tough. It will be tough. It will be a tall order. What pathway do you see that can give Peter Obi and the Labour Party a chance ahead of the ruling party APC and the PDP, which is also formidable in its own right?
You are talking about formidable parties, and you are mentioning APC, PDP. These are all dead parties waiting for their funerals. Okay? You don't mention parties that are Nigerians who will always spit on their graves. I am at service. I am willing to serve my country through whatever medium. I am available for service. Definitely the elections are coming. Definitely as a Nigerian who wants a better life for his children. Most of us are already on our way out. So that's why I wonder when I see people limping, saying they want to be president. I wonder what else you see want in life. But we want better life for our children. So we have to bring in a leadership that can avail a better Nigeria, which we shall bequeath to our children. Because the time is coming when our kids will begin to ask us, what action, what line of action did you take when things were going bad? For a great country like ours to have been reduced to what it is, Daddy, what role did you play? You were an army officer. You rose up to the ranks. What role did you play? If you cannot play any role, did you speak out? You were an electorate. You elected a government. Did you speak out to the leadership? That they were not doing the right thing? What efforts did they make in bringing in a better leadership? That is the role I'm going to be playing. I shall be out there campaigning, convincing other Nigerians that we'll have a better candidate in Peter Obi, and that we should look in that direction. From his utterances and his actions and the role he played in Anambra, it is enough for us to be able to say, can we try this? Out of all those we have seen showing interest. He might not be a saint, and we are not looking for a saint. We can't find a saint. None of us is a saint. But I think he looks, sounds, and appears like someone we can give some trust to. And we see all what he has revealed to us in terms of how he intends to save costs in governance, what he has revealed to us in terms of how leadership in this country has been wasteful, and so on. He has told us about how governors will hire private jets to go to Abuja when they could have flown economy class. You hire a private jet, park it in Abuja for 3-4 days. You pay all the fees you are supposed to pay there, and so on. At the end of the day, millions are spent in just mere days. You don't give a damn. The same governor doing that is owing teachers' salary. The same governor doing that has not paid pensioners. The same governor doing that is busy complaining he has no money. But you see the way they spend. Convoy, 50 vehicles, 30 vehicles, 20 vehicles. What are you doing with this convoy? Where are you going to? You were invited from your state to Abuja. You are going with 20 men. Were you not the only one invited? We are 20 people invited. Look, Nigeria is broke because of the wastages and leakages in governance. And we need somebody who can exhibit some level of prudence and positive frugality in the running of government. Those are the sort of people we need. Not people who will be throwing parties every day. We've just got to be serious. All this while we have not been serious. And the time has come to begin to interrogate and hold leadership, to ransom. Leadership must be accountable. That is just it. But when some of us talk this way, it appears as if, this guy is being rude to leadership. He's not being rude. He's asking about his rights. He elected you as a leader, and he's telling you are doing all the wrong things. All the wrong things. I was just going through some 7 points of promises made by APC in 2015, and I shook my head. No single one was has been kept. The only one kept there has to do with the feeding of these children in primary school, where now they will spend 1 naira and tell you they have spent 50 billion. They even feed the children into Saturdays and Sundays. You follow the children to their homes and feed them? Give me a break. What do you think we are? We are all dunces? You are the only one that has gone to school?
Okay, Colonel, let me come in there.
Start working. Hold it, please, hold it. Just start working on your handing over note, please, so that you can have a very comprehensive handing over note for the incoming administration. That's the only advice we can give you for now. We don't see how you can achieve any other thing.
Got it.
Yes, please.
Yes, Colonel Stan-Labo. While we're talking about holding the order to accountability, you alluded a bit earlier to the notion of a 21st century police. Could you paint us a clearer picture of what that looks like and what it will take us to get there? Why haven't we actually achieved that? And I'm speaking, of course, not just about the Nigerian police, but the entire Nigerian uniformed force. Very briefly, please.
We're talking about it. Say again.
Would you like me to take that again? Okay.
Talking about the 21st century police, I guess we are looking at a police force that is highly responsible. We're looking at a police force that is matured enough, that understands the yearnings of the people. And that's why my emphasis in most cases has been on this idea of community policing. and state policing. Okay? A situation where now you have policemen who are not just embedded, but, based in particular locations. They get to know the community gets to know them very well, and so on. They are part of the community takes ownership of its police, and so on. And so there's a lot of understanding between the police and the community. All right? And a lot of things are checked in a proactive manner before they even shoot their heads off. And if anything is building up, information flows easily, which gets crystallized into intelligence, and it could easily be used, and so on. All right? Once you drift or move or upgrade into community policing, it takes care of a lot of things, which unfortunately, something we could have achieved in the last 7 or 8 years, we have not done. By now, we could have been building upon the foundations of our community policing for the next administration to take over and further expand on it. But here we are. So the whole essence of the 21st century policing is embedded in what you find in the community policing. And it is so adaptive to its community yearnings, to the people, the expectations of the people, and so on. And it becomes very easy for you to accept that the police is your friend. Today you tell somebody the police is your friend, they just laugh at you. What police?
Well, all right. On that note, Colonel Hassan Stan-Labo, security consultant, we want to thank you very much for joining us on the morning show today.